Hello, everyone. Today I'm joined by Youssef Salem, a finance leader and entrepreneur who's shaking things up across the Middle East and beyond. He's the CFO of ADNOC Drilling, one of the biggest integrated drilling companies in the world, and has helped build and shape some of the region's biggest AI unicorns in the Middle East. What I love most about Youssef, and I just told him before hitting the recording button, is that he doesn't just focus on numbers, he also explores how faith and money connect. Like in his popular Ramadan series, Islam and Finance, we're about to know more details about this. Hi, Youssef. This is the first time I talked to you, but I've been following you for a very long time. And thank you so much for accepting the invitation.
Thank you so much for having me. Incredible being with you.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I would like you to introduce yourself with your own words. Who is Youssef Salem? I know you've been living around the globe. You've studied different things. Can you please give us a brief introduction?
Absolutely. I'm Youssef Salem. I'm Egyptian. I graduated from the American University in Cairo in 2012. Moved to Doha. Spent 4 years there with Q Invest, the leading investment bank in Qatar, working on both kind of advisory, so kind of M&A, restructuring, capital markets, debt and equity, as well as principal investments as well, both private equity and private credit. And then in 2016, I moved to the UAE, first with Moelis & Company, a US-based investment bank. I was based in Dubai, focusing on energy infrastructure and technology for Moelis across the Middle East and North Africa. Spent 5 years with them full-time, and then a couple of years on a part-time advisory basis, where I also in parallel was the CFO of Swvl, which is effectively similar to an Uber, but for high-capacity vehicles, buses, minibuses, microbuses, where we listed on Nasdaq in the US. And then I joined ADNOC, the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company, in 2023, first as CFO of AIQ, ADNOC AI, which then later Preside, an Abu Dhabi exchange-listed AI company, bought a controlling stake in. And then I became CFO of ADNOC Drilling, which is the drilling and oilfield services part of ADNOC, which is also listed on the Abu Dhabi exchange. I'm also an entrepreneur in residence at Hub 71, which is an incorporation acceleration hub for global startups to build out of global products out of Abu Dhabi. And I run Cora 71, which is an angel investor syndicate affiliate of Hub 71, which brings together angel investors from across the region to invest in startups in the region and beyond. And beyond that, I work with a number of different startups and venture capital firms in the Middle East across different capacities, board, advisory boards, etc.
Okay, one question that was not actually in the script. How do you find the time to do all these things? And you forgot to mention your podcast as well. You have a podcast. What? And you have kids, I guess, or right? So
Yes, I have
how do you do
Adam and
all
Hannah, they're
these things?
7 and 4. So yes, and yes, I think on the content side, it's something I'm kind of trying to spend a bit more time, whether kind of building on great platforms like your platform, or basically, as you said, some of the kind of independent programs or shows. And again, it's kind of trying to explore, as you said, maybe the kind of interlinking the more kind of technical, tangible, materialistic kind of finance and other elements we kind of live day to day, with maybe some of the other more kind of intangible, social, moral, faith related elements, and kind of how we can kind of bring it all together in our lives.
Yes, exactly. And I think in the era of AI, it's going to be more relevant than ever to connect with this on a deeper level with our spirituality. And I see it not only in the Arab world as a Muslim myself, but also in the West. Like there's a search for meaning beyond the machines. How important do you think it's going to be? Do you agree with me that it might become more important than ever?
I fully agree, because I think at a time where maybe like a lot of the, as you said, the more repetitive things, the more materialistic things and tangible things can be left for the kind of for the machine to do. I think that will actually create even more time for people, and we will have a little bit the luxury of a bit more time to be able to take a step back and kind of assess, what do we ultimately want out of all of this? What are we trying to do? What are we trying to build? And that kind of moral compass and moral guide, one, we have kind of the ability to focus on it more, and two, it also becomes more important, right? Because I think in a time where kind of effectively humans will be ever more powerful because of the ability to utilize kind of an effectively an infinite power of machines and AI to do a ton of things that we weren't able to do before, the importance of ethics in guiding this kind of ever increasing and largest ever power we have becomes even more critical, right? Because with kind of AI and with this unprecedented level of power, the kind of the asymmetry of kind of how you end up using this power has a kind of a bigger impact on us than ever.
Mhm. Are you seeing these conversation being had in the Middle East right now in a place that cares a lot about ethics and in finance and in AI? Are we having these conversations in the GCC countries, for example, or Egypt for that matter?
Yes, and I think the interesting thing about the Middle East is, for example, compared to some of the other countries where what we're seeing is an over-regulation of AI, with people trying to prescribe so many rules for how do you actually kind of build and all of that, which may not necessarily be the best thing from an innovation perspective. I think the discussion in the Middle East is more around the ethics related to the use cases and what you use it in, which I think is really where the fundamental discussion is very critical, right? That ultimately you don't want to limit innovation, you don't want to over-regulate innovation, but you want to be kind of really careful about how do you guide this towards the right societal outcomes and towards the right ethical outcomes. And I think that's the relevant conversation that's happening.
So we should maybe find a middle way between the overregulation, the European in the EU, for example, and we are famous for that, and the West, the United States, for example. So maybe something in the middle.
Exactly, exactly. I think you let people build the infrastructure. You don't want to be behind on innovation. You
Yeah.
definitely want to have the latest LLM, the latest compute, the latest kind of data centers, etc. So you want to make sure that you have the world-class infrastructure. And then when it comes to use cases and putting this to work, then this is where you want to be kind of very careful, but having had the innovation, but not do it in a way that you fall behind on the innovation in the first place.
Yes. That's very interesting. You've been in touch with the Western world since at the since an early age. You went to the American University, for example, and I'd like to explore. But also, you worked in the Middle East. How do you see if we look at the big picture? How do you see the intersection of the MENA region, Western markets? Are these two regions evolving together? I've seen Trump within in the region. Any like off the top of your head, like do you see any implications of this visit, or how do you see the future
Look,
prospects?
I think even if you look historically, the MENA region always sat at that middle of these kind of Eastern and kind of Western, you want to call it civilizations, empires, etc. From the time of kind of, let's say, the kind of the Arab, the kind of the first Arab Renaissance and prosperity kind of in between the Persian and the Roman empires, right? So that kind of ability for the Middle East to sit in the middle, converse with both parts of the world, and bridge both parts of the world and prosper accordingly is something that is very much in our DNA and history and should always continue to be the case, right? And you see it today, you see it at this time, as you said, where it's the time of the Trump visit and the kind of the unprecedented deals happening with the US and kind of and today with Europe, and you see also the latest kind of data centers and AI building in France, etc. So you see these kind of Western alliances kind of being as strong as ever. At the same time, you're seeing the kind of the level of kind of work and cooperation and visits with China and building with China, etc. And really with everyone, right? And that again, that is where the Middle East will always will be, and that's really our main advantage as a region. Is from a geographic perspective, from a welcoming, from a hospitality, from a tolerance, from an ability to converse with everyone. That's who we are, and that's our DNA, and that should continue to be what propels us forward. And in a world of AI, for example, where people are ever more worried about where do you house your data, where do you kind of produce your technology to and export it, having that kind of ability to prosper with everyone, converse with everyone, gives you a massive competitive advantage. I think we're combining our geographic advantage, time zone advantage, openness to the world, and converting it into very tangible. And today you see it, whether it's being the data centers and AI center of the world, to being the theme park center of the world, to being the energy center of the world, whatever it is, that is basically the kind of the hotspot today is the Middle East.
Yeah, exactly, and I see it's like an explosive mix between natural resources, ADNOC, and AI. You work yourself in a drilling company. How do you see this? Is this gonna give us in the Middle East an edge or like an advantage over other regions or not?
Yeah, a massive edge, because then the day today, the key enabler for AI today is the consumption of energy, and it's consuming a tremendous amount of energy, and we're still at the absolute earliest stage of it. If you fast forward to billions and billions of humanoids, AI agents,
Mm.
much bigger data center capacity, you will need to feed it incredible amounts of energy. the ADNOC strategy for AI is energy to the power of AI and AI to the power of energy. You need endless amounts of energy to power the AI, and you need AI to make the energy more efficient. And you create this positive flywheel where effectively your energy extraction becomes more efficient and cleaner because of AI. So you're able with lower emissions to feed AI more energy. The AI becomes more powerful off the back of feeding on more energy and feeds energy efficiency again. So it's the ability to create this positive virtuous flywheel between energy and AI. And the single biggest, when people ask if I want to bet on AI, what do I invest in? One obviously angle is to invest in AI itself. The second most relevant angle is to go invest in utilities, in gas companies, etc., to produce what's required for the AI. So that symbiotic relationship is going to continue to propel the Middle East forward.
That's very interesting. Do you see are oil companies investing in green or what I think they call it clean tech as well? Are they investing in it? Are you doing this? And is it even important? Because it feels like it's not good enough. It doesn't produce enough energy for AI at massive scales. Yeah.
So I think on your first question, absolutely. So if you look, for example, at Abu Dhabi and ADNOC, you're seeing investments in nuclear, solar, wind, oil, gas, hydrogen, geothermal, you name it, right? So any type of energy. And this links to your second question, which is a fundamental belief in energy addition rather than transition, right? Today, we're at an all-time high use of coal because of the continuing need for more energy. It's the same for the others. So today, it's not about, and this also answers your other question, is the returns are obviously not created equal on everything. And in any technology at the beginning, you're going to have subpar returns, right? If you look at where the renewables returns were a few years ago compared to where they are today. So yes, today, for example, hydrogen is an early stage, but renewables was there and made a leap. Tomorrow, hydrogen will make a leap. And then another technology will make a leap. So these leaps continue to happen. So what you want to be is you don't want to jump the gun on letting go of your existing technologies because they continue to be needed, profitable, and increase. But also you don't want to miss the boat on the new technologies just because they're uneconomic, because anything is uneconomic at the beginning. So you want to continue to make a lot of money from proven economic technologies, recycle some of that into the economic technologies which are not profitable yet. When they become profitable, they will feed others, and that cycle continues.
Yes, exactly. So you use part of the money that you're making from oil and you put it into other technologies. I actually have this, it's a bit of a secret theory, and it's that the Middle East and countries like Saudi Arabia have discovered that maybe we are about to shift completely from oil to clean tech, like solar. And that's why they are suddenly investing all that money in AI. Do you think that might be true? And yeah, would it be true? Like suddenly, because it feels like, a few years till very recently, before Trump was elected, everybody was talking about solar energy. And then now suddenly we stopped talking about it, even in the West, not as much as before, even in Europe, not as much as before. And we're talking about, it's not a taboo anymore. I was never actually against, oil. It's necessary. But now we're talking about it as if it's okay, as opposed to,
Yeah.
before. It was like a bit stigmatized.
Yes,
Uh,
I think a few things happened. I think one is energy demand forecasts have changed substantially because of AI.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
pre-AI, everyone was just focused on electric vehicles and saying, okay, electric vehicles is reducing the demand for oil and gas, and hence the demand will come down. So because demand curves were much more bearish, people had, call it the luxury, to say, okay, why don't we scale back supply and focus more on units? When people saw now the new demand curves with AI, that became impossible to meet these demands without ever increasing oil and gas. So that changed. Second is when ESG, a few years ago, a lot of people moved into creating these ESG funds.
Mm.
Unfortunately, a lot of these ESG funds have delivered subpar returns for their investors. And ultimately, at the end, money talks, right? So when these subpar returns were delivered, and you look at, for example, the share prices of some of the European energy companies, which have made the transition completely, versus some of the American companies, which have doubled down, and you see the differential shareholder returns. Ultimately, investors said, no, I want sustainability, but also you're in the business of making returns. So I think that has also kind of made that change. And then third also is people realizing that it's not a binary and either or equation. I can do oil, but I can do carbon capture with the oil. So it also became much more about how do we not have a conversation of, okay, I have to reduce oil to get there. What are the other technologies? Can I do direct carbon capture from air? can I do other things that can still get me to the outcome without having to compromise on energy security? Obviously, what happened in Europe with the war also had a big impact on people's perception of energy security. So that kind of came into play. Also, a very expensive energy in the winter had an impact on people's pockets. So at the end, kind of, we also there's always a triangle of energy sustainability, security, and affordability. And effectively, sometimes people over lean on one side of the triangle, but when the other side, which are affordability, got hit in the winter and security got hit with the war, people kind of corrected again.
Exactly. So it's not either or, it can be both. Okay. What are the big news on? I've seen you on multiple channels, especially in finance, talking about ADNOC. Can you give us a brief of what you've been up to at the company and why it's all over the place, all over the TV?
Yes. It's been, to be honest, it's been incredible. Like we listed 3.5 years ago. During that period, we almost kind of tripled our share price from kind of around 2 dirhams at the time of the IPO to we crossed the 6 dirhams briefly at some point. Plus, obviously, kind of very kind of high dividend distributions as well, where we distribute quarterly dividends and they're guaranteed dividends. And that has basically been enabled by a massive growth in the business. So we have more than doubled the size of the business since the IPO. We listed 3.5 years ago with $600 million of net income. This year, we're projected to make up to $1.45 billion of net income. And this is off the back of a significant increase in the operational size of the business. We've taken our fleet from 95 rigs at the time of the IPO to 142 today, going to 151. We built an international footprint. We now operate in 40 countries outside the UAE as well. And all of this has been a function of the points we've been discussing because domestically, ADNOC has been ramping up its oil capacity to 5 million barrels per day, its gas capacity to 13 billion cubic feet of gas per day, as well as international clients as well, also demanding certain levels of energy supply and security. So all of this have created kind of these effectively tailwinds to be able to operate more, which then provides a financial boost, which then provides a shareholder returns boost.
I have many of my friends actually have moved to the region, and I'm not talking about Europeans or Westerners of Arab origin, but completely white native European, and I wonder why people are moving there beyond taxes. Obviously, what
Yes.
makes the Middle East so special for them, and for anybody who is thinking about making the move, would you advise them? You were just recently in London. I've seen on LinkedIn.
Yes.
I'm sure. So you travel between both regions. What are the main difference, and why would it be interesting for an entrepreneur to move to the GCC or to the Middle East in general?
I would 100% advise it. I think first reason is quality of life. For example, safety. You operate in a 100% safe place where you don't have to worry about your family, your kids, your property. Everything is 100% secure. From a kind of an accessibility of services perspective, most services are relatively accessible, 24/7, affordable, etc. So first of all, you feel a real quality of life upgrade once you're in the Middle East on a day-to-day basis. Second is policy consistency. You mentioned taxes. I think beyond just what the level of taxes is, the constant change that you don't know what's going to happen next, you don't know what's the new policy. Whereas here you have kind of a very stable policy that's consistent, you know exactly what you're going to get, and things only improve. Like, for example, you go from a normal visa to a golden visa, etc. But you never regress, you never go backwards, you're never worried about what you kind of already achieved or the kind of what you're already in. Third is openness and tolerance to everyone. You don't need to worry at all about being in a place just because something happened geopolitically or something happened in your home country or part of the world. You're suddenly unwelcome or you're suddenly feeling that you're different from the others. It's a place for everyone where everyone coexists regardless of what's happening in the world. And you can operate with everyone in the world. So you don't need to also worry about being suddenly banned are unable to transact with someone just because they come from a country that the place you live in no longer see them as a country they want to transact with. Obviously, the latest trends happening like AI, etc., you become at the heart of these trends. Availability of capital. If you're building something, if you're operating something, you have an environment where you can capital raise and you can kind of fund. Obviously, it becomes a virtuous cycle because if you want talent, because other talent is moving, so when you move as well, you have accessibility to kind of to this talent. So I think it's really become this kind of melting pot of people coming from all over the world, leaving kind of all the political, the geopolitics aside, and really being able to come in a safe, tolerant, coexisting environment and build together in a very safe and secure way.
This is really a priceless summary. I've never heard it like all of these points before. Usually you talk about taxes, but you're totally right that you're not shifting, like not, sometimes you have the swift or suddenly overnight, and I've seen it here in Europe, suddenly you have a war with a country and now suddenly it's taboo to even talk about it in the land of the free. So things are changing yeah, like a few years ago, I would never, usually we talked about safe places like Europe, not safe places like the Middle East. So the narrative is changing very quickly. And I'm very excited, obviously, as somebody with roots there. What does it take to succeed? And you just talked about all the great things in the region, but of course, it doesn't come for free. It comes at a price. What does it take to succeed there?
Building trust, right? I think one of the obviously the key things about the region is people want to work with people that they trust, that they like, and that they know that they're not here for a short-term gain, right? So, for
Mm,
example, if you're coming here to raise capital, people are going to ask you how are you going to redeploy some of that capital back into the country and build something here. If you're coming here to sell a product, people are like, okay, how can you manufacture some of the parts here? How can you build some IP here? If you're coming in to do something that is kind of labor intensive, people are going to say, okay, how can you employ some of the people here? So now you will hear a lot in country value, localization, make it in the Emirates, kind of domesticating IP. You will hear a lot about this terminology. So really coming with a value prop for the country. And the great thing is every stakeholder that you engage with, a lot of them would wear both hats, would wear a private sector money-making, profit-making hat, but they would also wear a governmental, developmental, societal hat. So being able to address both hats with your value proposition is very critical.
interesting. Okay, so you don't put all your eggs in one basket. Target both. It's more intertwined.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly, exactly. And I appreciate that the conversation by definition implicitly covers both. And you have to come across as someone who genuinely wants to be here for the long term and wants to make money in the long term, redeploy that money and make the money again, as opposed to kind of a hit and run approaches.
So it's more about a sustainable approach. Like you want to come here, become a part of us, and that's what actually
Exactly.
I say to tell many of the companies we work with. Like because unfortunately in the West, still in many countries, they are thinking, okay, how can I make a sale? How can I sell my product quickly and online or in the distance make money? But no, they want you to become a part and be a company, a Saudi or an Emirati company that exports from there, right?
100%. And to be honest, if you're trying to sell from far, it's going to be
Yeah.
very difficult for you to compete with, let's say, potentially a Chinese product that will always be cheaper than you in that individual sale, right? So, like for example, if you're in fashion, you're not going to compete with Shein prices on
No,
being
it's
able to sell
impossible.
from far, right? But if you set up and you have a brand, you have a presence, and people appreciate your brand and relate to your brand and effectively find themselves in your brand, then that is where you can compete.
Yes, exactly. So maybe, yeah. So maybe in times of AI, personal brand is becoming more important. Human relationships are becoming important, I guess. Um,
Absolutely.
and I've noticed as well, like someone like you, a successful person like yourself, you're still active online, and like Elon Musk, for example, he's still there. He's still in podcasts. Why do you think it's so important? Is it becoming increasingly more important than ever? I personally think so. But why do you think so? If you think so,
Yes.
and why are you doing it?
Yes, no, I definitely agree. So I think picking up on a couple of the points you made. One is the kind of the personal branding, corporate branding intertwined. Today, people are, as you said, much more likely to engage with humans than they would engage effectively with corporate brands, etc. Because historically, obviously, people were a little bit further away, right? Like you would see something or just on a billboard in the street, etc. So it was natural that you're not as engaged as much, that there's a bit of a distance. But today, with all of us being kind of hyper online, people are expecting that personalization, expecting to see that behind the scenes, engage with you directly. So they're less and less likely to engage with corporate brands, with cold narratives, and more and much more likely to engage with humans, right? So if you want today to deliver your messages, you can no longer sit behind a wall of, okay, by the way, that's my corporate messaging. You have to go out as a human and deliver the message in a very human way for it to kind of to land and engage. So that's a kind of a key difference now that's required. Second, as you said, at the time of AI, where if you're just trying to generate a standard content or a standard narrative, the AI can do that. And the market now is flooded with AI posts and AI content. So to differentiate, you have to be almost like ultra human, right? Because if you're on the basic human level, the AI can mimic a basic human, right? So you really need to take your kind of your EQ and your emotional intelligence to the next level to really be able to kind of differentiate from the machine. Obviously, people are more online than ever. I think it's also partially the result of COVID. So now the space that you have to interact with people, the platforms also are much more like if you look take a few years back, a platform like LinkedIn, people would like just check it like every now and then, just kind of open, maybe check a job. Now people almost use it like on a daily basis, like a Meta or a TikTok, where people are kind of engaging in conversations. Obviously, TikTok came in with the ability. Previous, it used to be kind of more long form video, which is difficult for people to do, requires a lot of investment. Today, you can kind of do short form video. Actually, today, probably sometimes you see even lower production videos with a phone camera going more viral than a kind of a high production because people see themselves more in that kind of quicker thing and that etc. as opposed to maybe the more complex thing which they see as a bit further away from them. So in that kind of ever more connected and accessible world, being there and etc. And linked to your question of kind of why do you do it? Like with any, if you take the example again, we'll go back to corporate branding. It's all about awareness and top of mind. It becomes the same in personal branding, right? You want to always be there, always be accessible, in order to kind of build that top of mind, effectively kind of perspective that people have and awareness that people have. And obviously, once you're top of mind, then by definition, that opens opportunities for you. You mentioned at the beginning, we've never met, but we're doing this podcast
But it
because
feels
we've
like
been kind
we've
of
met actually because
exactly,
of the
exactly. We've
following.
been
Yeah.
connected online, and that opened up an opportunity for us to have this podcast, right? And actually, we're having, as I said now, like an amazing conversation because
Yeah.
we've been connected. We know each other. We know each other virtually, right? So I think
Yeah.
it's created that amazing space.
Yes, exactly. I think it's important to break through the noise because there's so much noise, and especially as you said, as you mentioned before, AI. Now there are AI posts, and even the comments. Sometimes you feel like, and some of the comments I get on my posts as well. Sometimes you can see it's a bot who wrote it. So we're gonna be faced with all these bots and machines talking to each other. So it's very important to break through the noise and to be authentic as well. Authenticity, I think, is very important, as you said. But I feel like beyond just being, beyond your ambition, you were saying it's important to be there and it creates opportunities. But I don't think it's for everybody because I see that I feel like you have the need to share with the world who you are. You're not just doing as doing it as a job. I see as well that you like sharing with people.
Yes. 100%. I think again, I think goes back to the identity point, right? That I think obviously today we are in a world where we're very focused on obviously the very materialistic,
Yeah.
capitalistic side of things, which is great, right? Because effectively that allows us to build prosperity, build things, move forward, etc. But also we want to make sure that we retain our moral compass, we retain our ethics, and we remember why we're doing this in the first place, right? So I think being able to go out and share that identity to people and make people and everyone comfortable to also share their identity and not kind of feel that it is taboo or that we have to stick all of us to one narrative. As long as ultimately all of us are building for the collective prosperity, but ultimately everyone is coming at this with a different angle and different causes and also kind of propelling our societal causes and missions while doing this, then that becomes very important. It becomes very important that people, as I said, see that so that they also get encouraged to kind of to do that, right? So for example, you talked about kind of the series that we had in
Mhm.
Ramadan about basically kind of the Quranic kind of principles around finance and business. And then off the back of that engagement, you have now kind of programs around the Quranic principles in law, in communication, in tolerance, a lot of things. So that kind of starting the conversation and propelling the conversation is important. So for me, it's less about trying to overthink what is the specific content you're putting out there, more of just going out, sharing. And once the conversation starts, then you will develop, other people will develop, and then the conversation, like any conversation, right? You need a conversation starter, and then it flows amazingly from there.
Yes, that's amazing. Um, do you think? I'm sure you've seen the news about Google's VO.
Yes.
Um, are we still going to be relevant, the content we're making now, and why authenticity, going back to this, is important? Because now in a few months, maybe we'll see videos. You can make a video of yourself talking like you're
Yes.
talking like this, and you cannot even distinguish it from reality.
Yes. Yes.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, no, no, 100%. We've seen now ones where they say, okay, it's an 80% complete movie, an action movie, it's 80% complete. You've seen the kind of the humanoid girl that was walking in China a few days ago on the street and speaking to people like seamlessly. So I think that is happening, and I think that's a drive for us to just we need to constantly become better at what we do, right? And I think if you think about over time, the kind of the machine will always keep moving forward, and the only way to kind of compete with it is that you also keep moving forward at an incredible speed and continuing to build where you differentiate. So as you said, the main differentiation today of the human being versus the machine is on the emotional intelligence, on the empathy side, etc. And that's kind of the key difference. So obviously, as you said, what we define today as human, the machine is becoming ever more human, right? So that the kind of
Yes.
basic humanity, let's call it, and ability to act and sound like a human is already there and will continue to be there. So we almost need to become the best versions of ourselves to continue to have an edge. And that's what the authenticity, the kind of the basic, again, authenticity will be there. So how do you take it to the next step? So I think the machine would always, like almost how any competition works, right? It propels you to be the best version of yourself, to be able to outcompete. We're now not only competing with each other as human, propelling each other, but the machine is coming right behind us and pushing us, whether from a technical perspective, where we all have to really upskill on the data science side in order to be able to cope and kind of continue to be relevant technically, or on the content of this side, we have to be the best versions of ourselves and most natural to be able to continue to be kind of one level ahead of the machine on kind of being natural and authentic.
Exactly. And maybe it's not a good, I don't know if, is it a good way of defining, of looking at it, like competing with, because I feel like maybe we shouldn't even talk about competition because we're human beings. We're obviously, I mean, we created this machine. So why compete with it instead of saying, hey, we need to learn how to harness it, how to control it, how to
Yeah.
use it for our benefit.
So I think that makes a lot of sense to the level of when effectively you are teaching the machine and you are writing all the algos for the machine. Because then effectively you're saying, okay, the same way we had the transition from the agriculture to the industry and from the industry to the service, what you say is, okay, I'm leaving behind to the machines the more repetitive services and I'm taking on the more creative ones. And effectively I'm utilizing the machine. So I think up to that level of intelligence, this makes perfect sense. But I think once the machines are unlocking the next level of intelligence and reasoning, where they're able to think, they're able to be creative, they're able to write their own code, then while I would love to still think about it this way, I think practically speaking, we have to acknowledge that the machine is no longer waiting for us to tell
Mm.
it what to do, to teach it. It's now also learning and operating and building on its own next to us, right? So, for example, to give an example from my world, which is the investment, yes, all what we've seen historically is how can I use the machine to make better investments. But we're now starting to reach a point where the machine is saying, thank you very much. Give me the capital and I'll take it from there. I'll allocate the investments end to end. I'll make the decisions, right? And this is the tipping point that we are now that we also have to kind of appreciate and recognize.
Yeah, of course. Um, that said, do you think we should be worried about the pace it's going at?
I think I break it into two things. I break it into one, the macro level. On a totality level, the pace will only make us better off. Any technology in the world has only made the world collectively better off. So, for example, fast forward 10, 20 years, we're going to have a higher collective income, higher GDP, more efficiency, more peace in the world, because obviously wars are extremely detrimental from an economic and societal perspective, and hence with more intelligence, there will be kind of less turmoil. So all of that for the collection is better. Now the question is then, on a specific income individual level, what's the impact? Because are you going to need more jobs, less jobs, etc.? That's what's still an unknown. And here, that's why the other key element conversation to the AI becomes the redistribution of wealth. Because obviously, AI would, by definition, create even more inequality and concentration of wealth because a lot of the traditional economic theories are still based on heavy labor participation that allows for that redistribution. If that labor participation is becoming ever less critical in certain ways, then the redistribution of wealth becomes even more critical. I think if we have the right redistribution of wealth mechanisms, the right upskilling and reskilling, etc., then we don't need to worry. But we need to make sure that governments and societal organizations are going at the right pace, catering for that world, whether it's thinking about universal basic income, thinking
Mhm,
about
look at
how
that.
tax brackets work, thinking about massive training programs, thinking about reshifting people from the effectively services economy to the creator economy, the same way we've went from industrial to services, now from services to creative. This is the conversation we need to have in order not to have to worry.
Do you think some people talk about UBI? They say, yes, it's okay, but it might be a tool to control people and to subjugate them. What are your thoughts about this?
So
If you
I
have any
think,
thoughts, of course.
yes, I think it is needed, but it's not enough, right? You definitely need a universal basic income because basically in a time where jobs potentially will be taken away at an unprecedented rate, you cannot rely on instant re-employment, right? There will be a level of upskilling and reskilling and opening of new sectors for that transition to happen. And because of the incredible speed of AI, probably at sometimes the loss of jobs from AI will be faster than the reskilling and redeployment. So you need that UBI in order to at least be able to plug these transition periods. It's not enough because the UBI solve for you financially, economically. It doesn't solve for you psychologically and societally, and
Purpose.
from a feeling of satisfaction, a feeling of purpose. So you need to complement the UBI with the upskilling, reskilling, creator economy creation to be able to maintain the person not just from a financial living standard, but from a societal ambition and psychological living standard.
That's very interesting. Let's talk about our beloved Egypt and AI. Do you feel, uh, have you seen or are you seeing, did you even envision AI changing how Egypt is? From the fool, from the
Definitely.
seller of like beans on the street or to everything, you know?
Definitely, definitely. I think Egypt has a lot of advantages when it comes to AI. One obviously is part of the AI, funnily enough, is still labor intensive, right? For example, look at annotation. In order to be able to train an LLM in the first place, you need a massive number. Now, obviously, you're moving more and more into self-annotation, but you still need a large number of individual annotators who annotate pictures, voices, videos to be able to train the models in the first place. So Egypt offers a great place in terms of the wealth of like so the number of people who can do that at a low cost. Second is from a content perspective. If you're building anything that's, for example, Arabic LLM, the amount of Arabic content you have in Egypt is unprecedented, right? So, for example, we had one of the companies in the UAE that was utilizing the Alexandria Library, which is more than 500,000 books to train their LLMs, right? So that the wealth of Arabic content there from a training perspective is obviously quite huge. Talent, obviously, availability of talent. Egypt has always been a very stronghold of engineering talent. So obviously building a lot, that's big advantage. Obviously a training ground and a playing ground to test things because again Egypt has always been, because of the low cost, the ability to test at mass has always become very critical. You have AI startups that are coming out of Egypt that are very strong and from even before the hype, right? You have a company called Synapse Analytics. They've been in Egypt for a good few years, even before ChatGPT, before the hype. So you have people in Egypt who have seen it early and have went after this. So I think yes, Egypt has a very critical role to play within the space. You have Egypt has had a kind of a world-class data center from a long time ago. So it's I think yes, Egypt has an extremely critical role to play and space to play in that.
Yeah, exactly. And I recently I posted about this. I've seen Muhammad Ramadan, one of MENA's biggest singers and artists. His latest video actually is made by AI. So now we can see AI director. So I think even like in the Arab world, people are willing to take risks and try new things. And so this is something as well that I appreciate. Arabic and AI, are you familiar with this? Because I have a feeling like Arabic must be harder. It's harder to maybe build Arabic LLM models in Arabic than in English, for example, or Western languages.
So I think that the dialect is what a lot of people are really spending time on. So you have a lot of AI agents across the region which are popping up. And the key challenge is basically how do you get the dialect right and how do you get that free flowing human conversation, right? So, for example, you have one called Maqsam where they're kind of trying to build one is that kind of more of plain Arabic language that allows you to be able to cater for as many people. And then having kind of different versions and different dialects to be able to cater for the different ones. So I think that getting that accuracy right on the dialects, at the end of the day, we call it Arabic, but at the end of the day, it's 22 different
Mhm.
dialects, some of them even different sub-dialects. And that really is the kind of the key innovation.
Yeah, exactly. Um, I'd like to talk about the series now. We would transition a little bit into your series and Ramadan. It's very interesting. It actually the first when I saw it, I thought of two things. The first one was Al-Ilm wal-Iman by Mustafa Mahmoud, Science and Faith, I believe. And now I've noticed that now that newer generations are talking about, are trying to tap into, to link, make the connection between money and faith. Right before it as well, I think his name is Muhammad Abu Naga. He had like a Al-Mal Halal. Was your series inspired by it, and how does
Yes,
it
it is.
differentiate?
Yeah.
And yeah,
Absolutely, it's inspired by both and by others as well. So obviously, Ilm Quran, Mal Halal, and others as well. And it's like really building on all of that, right? I think, as you said, a lot of people have historically explored how some of the potentially scientific miracles in Quran, some of the different kind of angles of where the Quran has really been very revolutionary and kind of in terms of societal concepts, scientific concepts, etc. We wanted to look at the same from a financial perspective. I think also Ilmal Halal has done an incredible job in bringing in what's people's perspective on what constitutes permissible money and kind of an acting in good faith. I think so we built on all of that. I think where we try to bring something new is I think a lot of the discussions around Islamic finance is about what's permissible and impermissible and what's riba and what's not riba and interest rates, etc. We kind of came in from a different angle. Said like before we talk about the rulings, let's talk about the foundations that Islam and kind of the Quran has set when it came to finance and the principles, the transparency, the equality, the justice, the contractual protections, the dispute resolution methods, the way they've really created a foundation for people to be able to build contracts, tax systems, financial considerations, etc. Because at the end, while generally we spend a lot of time from a religion perspective focusing on what's halal and haram, what's permissible and impermissible, which is extremely critical, we have to spend an equal amount of time and importance on understanding the principles that the religion came with. Because at the end of the day, when the religion came in addition to setting what's right and wrong, it has created at the time a massive societal, economic, financial transformation in order really how society operates to create a more just, equitable, equal society. And these principles for me are extremely critical to really operate with. And that was really the point of the show.
yes, and more than ever, I guess I believe because especially now with all the noise, with AI, with things happening so fast, it's important, as you said, to have like clear, not blurred lines to know, okay, what's halal, the foundations, and then how to apply your life. Because the more information we have, things might get blurry, right?
100%.
Very good. Muslims in the West. Do you see any difference? You were, as I mentioned before, you were in London recently. I'm sure you've been to Europe and the West many times. But do you see any difference between how Muslims are, between Muslims as Muslims in the West and Muslims in the Middle East?
I think in the Middle East, we're very spoiled. We take things for granted.
Yeah.
And really, when you go to the West, is when you appreciate people actually, what it takes for people to be able to stick to their faith, to practice their faith, to uphold it in environments which are maybe more challenging to do that. So really, you go back and you reflect and you say, like when you're born with the faith, you've always lived in a place where that faith is the majority, where you can practice it freely, where you can practice all the time, where it is the norm, where it's embedded already into everything. And it makes you really appreciate that and not take it for granted and consider how lucky we are compared to people who are constantly making a conscious effort every day to be able to do that and uphold that in environments and systems which are maybe more challenging. So really makes you one very appreciative and grateful for what you have, and then second is very fond and impressed and complimentary of the efforts that people are able to do in the West to try to kind of to kind of stick and uphold and practice and showcase their faith.
Yeah, very interesting. Do you have any advice for parents, whether parents in the West or parents anywhere in the world, to prepare the kids for what's coming?
I think there's two things. I think there's how do you prepare your kids for what's coming technically in a world of technology and AI. And my personal humble advice would be just to study data science, right? To like really focus on that, and then you can apply that data science into whatever field. But for me, for example, for finance, it's now about studying data science and then applying it in finance, not studying finance and then seeing how I can bring in data, because data is the foundation and then finance or any other sector is the application, as opposed to the other way around. I think when it comes to the discussion we've just been having is more of how do you bring the balance between, on one hand, raising a kid with full tolerance, acceptance, coexistence, being able to live anywhere in the world and appreciate everyone and be friends with everyone, while at the same time having a very clear identity and set of value and set of ethics, that so that he effectively knows who he is, but he's able to completely accept and live with anyone else.
You talked a bit about earlier about emotional intelligence and social intelligence. Is it something, should we focus more on these things, even more than tech, when raising our kids?
I would say yes, it's extremely important to focus, but I think also tech for me is also extremely critical, right? Because at the end of the day, today you want to be able to utilize and build from a tech. Like you cannot say, let's say the tech is anyway accessible, so in a way it's kind of less need, I need less to do it. For me, no. We've like when I studied, for example, financial mathematics, right? You never say, okay, now because I have a calculator, or now because I have an Excel, or now because I have an advanced kind of computational model, or now because I have AI, I will study less maths or more maths, right? You always study maths across the board. You always build extremely strong mental maths, and then you utilize the latest machine at any point in time. So I think the importance of technical knowledge is as strong as ever. Same with communication, right? Whether you are writing with pen and paper, you are writing on a machine, you are kind of writing with ChatGPT, the importance of being able to communicate effectively is important as ever. But yes, to your point, to be able to differentiate more versus the machine on one hand, and to be able to survive more in an ever more polarized and conflicting world, you need to have the emotional intelligence both to differentiate on an individual basis professionally, and to be able to survive and live and love in an ever more kind of complex world personally.
Exactly. It's not either or again. It's not like, it's like saying, okay, we have cars and then I'm not going to walk, I'm not going to train, I'm not going to work out. So you let your body, like, become weak. No, you're totally right. What about screens? Like, you have small kids. What ages were
Yes.
they?
7 and 4.
7 and 4. Okay. Are they already using devices? Do we start? Should we start? My kids are same age. Should we
Yeah.
let them like start or start teaching them now AI and coding and stuff? What do you think?
Once it's about kids, it becomes my wife's decision. So I can tell you
Okay.
what she does, as opposed to
I
any
have to
say
ask
I
her
have.
first.
Exactly. So what she does is basically kind of 20-minute kind of parcels every day. So for a total of 60 minutes on the screen. And I think her thesis is, again, on one hand, you want to limit screen time in order to kind of enable social interaction, avoid screen addiction. But at the same time, you also don't want them to disconnect from being able to cope up with what their peers are doing and to cope up with that. So you want to also allow sufficient time to be able to meaningfully watch the latest videos, the latest trends, play with a couple of things. And just what she's very focused on is kind of she avoiding anything that has a chat, because I think that's the latest risk we're seeing now, is all the kind of the game platforms which allow for chats, etc. So as long as kind of non-chat based.
But AI in schools, I mean, they've started talking. China is doing it even at an early age. I think the UAE as
The
well.
UAE is doing it. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you personally think it's a good idea?
I think it's a very, very good idea, because I think, again, it's if you think about it, again, if we take the previous example, how do you have the Chinese and Indian massive kind of increase? And this is one of the areas where we as Arabs have fell behind, is because they've instituted a lot of technology learning from early age, and they built world-class institutes. And that's how they were able to first kind of offshore a lot of technology to their countries and ultimately export a massive amount of talent globally. We fell behind a little bit on this on the Arab side. And I think the great thing about every technology is it allows us an opportunity to reset again, right? Look at Kenya, for example. They missed the credit cards revolution. They became almost the first in the world on the mobile money with M-Pesa. And now it doesn't matter that they missed the credit cards wave. Kenya is one of the most advanced globally on mobile money. So with AI, it gives us an opportunity as Arabs to say, okay, maybe we've missed a little bit some of the B2B SaaS, we've missed some of the previous technological revolution. It's totally okay, because if we catch the AI one in 10 years from now, no one will care that we missed the early 2000s wave because we have now caught effectively the latest wave.
It's an equalizer. You're totally right. That's a very
100%.
optimistic way to see it. Youssef, any final thoughts or any question that you think I should have asked you, but I haven't?
No, I think it was a great conversation. We covered so much, and obviously I watched the show. I love the show. It's really great to be on it, and it's always a good to leave some things so we can always have a follow up. So it's a
Yeah,
good
exactly.
experience to
I'd love
forget
to have
some
a
stuff.
part. I'd love to have a part two. In Egypt and UAE and in France or whatever. Even if you go next time, go
Love
to London, let me know, and maybe we can book a studio and do it face to face. I feel like you're like a Pandora's box, and there's so many things. And as I said before at the beginning of the show, you're a good mix of many things, like, spiritual, technical, entrepreneurial. I forgot to ask you one question about being an entrepreneur. Okay, so you obviously you work in a company.
Yes.
Can we be an entrepreneur and an employee at the same time? 'Cause usually in the West, many people say, quit your job, quit your 9 to 5 job,
Yeah.
and your 9 to 5 job. Is it a good idea, or can we combine both? Can we be both
Yeah.
things?
I think your point is great. You don't have to, right? Yes, if you
Uh,
want to go all in and you want to reap 100% of the economic benefit of your startup, then you quit, because obviously if you build inside, even if you're able to build inside, the equity you will have will be significantly less compared to starting your own company. But if you want to have that balance, yes, and by the way, you're seeing an ever increase in this role titled entrepreneur residence. It's going up massively because companies are realizing that the reason they're falling behind to startups, they have more resources than startups, they have more money, sometimes more talent, but they're falling behind because of the bureaucratic structures which are limiting innovation. So they say, okay, let's effectively almost spin off these kind of divisions, call him an entrepreneur in residence, call him anything you want, let him own the P&L and the kind of the business end to end, and hence being able to drive. So you have that ability. Again, the main difference is they will never give you the same equity in that business that your own startup would give. So for me, yes, you definitely can. You just need to make the decision, am I better off benefiting from the resources of a massive corporation, de-risking with a salary, de-risking by having a team from day one, but accepting to have a lower share of the upside? Or do I go and quit and build on my own, scramble much more for resources, but if and when ultimately it's successful, I get a disproportionate amount of success, financial and economic.
Exactly. And just make sure you following your gut feeling, your heart, and doing what you feel like you're be best at and what you really want to do.
Exactly.
Really love.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you so much, Youssef. It was a
Good
pleasure.
pleasure.
Looking forward to part 2, inshallah.
We're super looking forward.
Thank you.